Welcome to Round Hill Radio, the podcast from Round Hill Community Church. Through our conversations, we discover the holy in the ordinary, look for moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we're talking about. We talk about faith. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Leslie.
And welcome back, everybody,
Yeah.
to Round Hill Radio.
Fantastic.
We are back. We're only a month after we said we'd come back. So I feel like...
Delayed openings.
I mean, they say begin as you intend to continue, and I feel like we're being consistently inconsistent.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Surprises in store.
Surprises in store. Well, and to be honest, I'm not necessarily surprised because you just came back from sabbatical.
I did.
And like that's hard to come back from being gone for a long time, no matter what it's for. And especially I feel like when, sabbaticals are supposed to be intentionally restful.
Mm-hmm.
And we here on staff didn't want to be like, hi, let's dump everything on you immediately.
Right.
So,
Let's erase all the positive effects in a day or two.
We try not to do that to you all the time. Just occasionally when necessity or dictates.
That's right. When it's necessary.
Exactly. So when we were sitting and meeting and talking, and you were starting to tell me about your sabbatical, I did that thing that people do. And I said, wait, save it for the podcast. So, hey, Ed, what did you do on your
Have
sabbatical?
you contained yourself all this time?
It's been tough, genuinely, because I have no idea what happened or what you did or what stories you have to tell us. So I am learning along with our audience.
Fantastic.
So let's start with what was your intention at the beginning of the sabbatical? What were your hopes and expectations for your sabbatical?
Sounds good. Well, the good news I want to say is that the lingering effects of the sabbatical are still with me, and they were all positive effects. So that's a good thing.
Excellent.
Leslie, this sabbatical, and I've been fortunate to have had a couple of others in the past, has been very much unlike anything I've experienced. In the past, I have had this extremely clear theme with lots of activities and so on and so forth. And this time, I decided to do a lot less of that.
Okay.
And the other part of this sabbatical that was completely new and different is that I broke it into two parts.
Oh,
so I
right.
had the February part where I was gone for a whole month. And it was wonderful to be in the American Southwest, most of it in Arizona, but I was also in Death Valley, and which is regularly over 103 degrees these days, just checking the weather.
Oh.
And then came back for 2 months and then left on sabbatical again for the 3-month period of time. And I did have this sense that during the sabbatical, I had certain books I was going to read and writings I was going to write and so on and so forth. I let it all go.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was very new. And I really would say that I recognized when I started the 3-month long period just how much of an effect the pandemic had on me.
Really?
And so it was only when I had a chance to rest that I think the full level of fatigue came to the surface.
Sure.
And that's not unusual. People will say, well, I go away on vacation. I spend the first week just adjusting to the vacation.
Or are you immediately get sick?
Exactly.
That happens
right?
in our house a lot.
It does.
Yeah.
And I think it happens to other people. So I recognized when I started the sabbatical, I had to really strip things back and so on. So I had a little saying for myself during the sabbatical, which is don't force anything. So I didn't force myself to do a lot of reading or a lot of travel or whatever. And then I found over a period of weeks that it started to take on this flow. And I was able to read and I was able to study and I was able to get some rest, but it was all in moderate measure. When I started the sabbatical, actually, I met a woman she said, I just finished my sabbatical and I did this 350-mile hike and I immediately fell to the floor in exhaustion just thinking about that. And pastors are notorious for doing this.
Sure.
Oh, wait, we've got 3 months off. How can we jam full it, of everything that we haven't wanted to, haven't had a chance to do in the last 6 years.
Right. Yeah.
I tried to avoid that.
I appreciate that. And I feel like there's always a temptation. I feel like when pastors go on sabbatical to plan the entire year and write a doctoral dissertation and
Yes.
achieve all the things.
Completely.
Yeah.
So I'll give you one example of something that happened that I really enjoyed, and it stayed with me, gave me a lot of fun. I like to write in general, although I'm a great procrastinator when it comes to writing. But I've never really, for a long time, I haven't had a chance to write fiction. So I happened to notice that there was a resource called the Writer's Digest University. Thought, boy, that sounds like it's
That's a great name.
perfect,
Yeah.
right? And they have all of these online classes. And they did a 2 or 3 day series of classes on the short story. I thought, that sounds intriguing. And actually, I happened to be on retreat at that time at a small monastery up in the Hudson River Valley. So I had my computer and I simply opened it up and I just watched these classes. And it was the most enjoyable experience.
So fun.
And then I started doing a little bit of writing, which I hadn't expected to do.
Nice.
And that was fun, and kind of submitted a couple of pieces. And so that was something I hadn't planned. It came up out of the blue. It was fascinating, and I just really, really loved it.
Some unexpected creativity.
Yeah.
Did you find, and I know in your sort of air quote normal life, you do a lot of art. Well documented it here.
Yes, indeed.
Did you have did your relationship with your art making change? Was it different? Did you set it aside?
So I will jump to the answer. For the most part, I did set it aside.
Really?
Yeah.
I was wondering.
Yeah, I started during the beginning of the sabbatical. I actually took a little bit of a class, and it just wasn't really connecting with me. So I did a few things, but then I thought, I'm not going to force this either. You know, I know that the standard line for art is that inspiration only happens when you're doing the thing.
Right.
You know, don't wait for it. It's going to happen in the moment.
Right.
But in my case, I felt like I wanted to step back from it, which doesn't mean that I became uninvolved with art. I actually spent a lot of time in museums in New York City, and I spent a lot of time looking at other people's art. And so that's a way to stay involved with creativity. And now I'm finding, after I've been back for 5 or 6 weeks, that I'm just starting to get the itch to go back down into the studio.
Yeah.
So that's just starting to happen again.
Did it feel, I'm wondering if did making art in that way in your studio, did it feel too much like your normal world? Like taking a break from that also felt like a little bit of a break from the routine?
I would say that was accurate.
Yeah.
Yep. And I actually spent a lot of time in Greenwich during the sabbatical. I traveled so much in February, I really didn't feel a need to do any more of that. And Greenwich is a beautiful community. I mean, and the area around us. So I spent a lot of time walking very slowly, listening, and spending time sitting in a part of the house where I could look outside and just listen, you know, to the insects at night, to birds and all of that. So that was, I slowed myself way, 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 way down.
Oh, fabulous.
And I think this part of the sabbatical, this aspect of it connects with a podcast that we did on the spirit some time ago. And I think there's an ancient understanding that this reality that we call the spirit tends to show up a little more frequently when we're more open, receptive, and when the gates of our imagination are open.
Sure.
And I did find over the course of the sabbatical, as I slowed down, I felt this new energy coming my way. And that was a wonderful feeling.
That's exciting.
So for all of those months and years of feeling very depleted, that was a beautiful, corrective to that. So that was really but I really had to keep myself focused on this, don't force anything. Just see what it's like not to do that for a while.
Was there anything in particular? It sounds like there were a lot of little ones, but is there anything that particularly that surprised you about the time?
There was one thing that surprised me very much, which is when I was on the Delaware and Hudson Rail Trail, I took a sharp left turn on the trail and was face to face with a bear.
Oh,
that really surprised me.
That's quite a surprise. Were you on a bicycle?
I was on a bicycle.
Oh, did you stay on the bicycle?
Well, I think that, if a drone had been following me at that point, it would have been one of those cartoon moments where I turned around and suddenly, I was at like 100 times faster than I was. Yeah, I didn't want to disturb this bear. He looked so comfortable, in the middle of the pathway, just kind of grooming himself.
Oh my gosh.
So I sped in complete reverse, went back to the place where I had started out at the beginning of the day. But I had a great story to tell back at the bed and breakfast where I was staying.
Yeah.
So they thought that was really exciting. I said I thought it was exciting too, but it was good to get away in one piece.
Brief, yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So yes. So that was a definite surprise. And I think it wasn't really so much of a surprise. It was just this trust the instinct thing. Mm-hmm. Trust your instincts, and it worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad to have you back.
It's great to be back. And here's the thing: when you come back from a sabbatical, you really want to feel like you're glad to be back.
Yeah.
If you're not feeling you're glad to be back, that's not good.
Yeah.
That tells you something. I mean, it may tell you something good. I shouldn't say that.
No,
but in my case, when I came back on the first day, first of all, I couldn't wait to get back. Yay. Missed all of you guys.
We missed you.
I have a great team, amazing team. And that's one thing I have to say, Leslie. So I did get to spend some time on a couple of short retreats with clergy, and so many clergy are struggling these days and feeling very depleted, feeling incredibly alone.
Sure. And
we have a remarkable team of staff members. And I know that the congregation appreciates that, but every day I'm mindful of that. So to be able for me to come back to a team, that's a huge, huge plus.
Yeah. And I felt like the team kept things going in a way that didn't, sometimes I feel like when you have a sabbatical situation, sometimes it feels like your head got chopped off. And this just felt like we were like, oh no, you're fine. Go. Take as much time as you need. We're fine.
I'm ready to volunteer and create that space whenever you need it.
So, and yes, we're happy to have you back.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And we are launching into a year now of looking at values.
You can say it.
I know, it feels so weird. So here, the thing with that, I'm so excited about this. I'm so excited about the year ahead and all the things we're looking at. It's just the word values that makes me internally cringe, which I think I should probably unpack at some point.
Give it 12 months. Yes,
Give it 12 months and we'll do it. I need a different word, I think, is my problem. But we're calling it What Matters Most.
What Matters Most.
And we're looking at 12. I love how I keep doing the promo for this. We're looking at 12 different things that this is why you should
energies.
Energies. I love. See, that's a great word. That contribute to a good life, a life that feels authentic and tied to who we want to be and who we want to be as a community. This month is imagination.
Yes.
Which I love that we're starting with imagination.
Yeah.
That makes me excited. So each month we're looking at something different. We have imagination. Next month is generosity. The month after that is gratitude. So always feel free. Always check out roundhillcommunitychurch.org if you want to check out what we're chatting about. And we will tie in our podcast themes to those monthly themes as well, exploring them in different ways. But the reason I bring it up today is because your sermon yesterday, which for our online community you can check out on the church website or on our YouTube channel, which is Roundhill Community Church, was, I thought, I'm going to embarrass you, stunningly amazing.
Oh.
It was incredible. And I keep thinking about it because it was the power of a person in a position of leadership saying the things that kind of we've all been thinking. And to hear the power of you saying things like, so why are we all still here? People are leaving. So why are you here? Felt so powerful. I literally was like leaning forward in my seat. And I do this thing because I'm up in the organ loft and there's like a little wall behind my head, and organists really tend to hunch. So I usually this is very random, but I take the sermon time to usually lean my head against the wall to like try to correct my posture for at least 20 minutes. Right. You probably know.
Physical impact.
But I was literally like arms on my knees leaning forward during this entire message because it felt so important. It felt, and you shared some of your own story about, which we've also detailed on the podcast. And so I'm curious about what led you to that, how it felt, especially because you deliver sermons twice now. You do it once for the online service, and then you kind of, I don't know if you reflect on it and you're like, nope, that's good, I'll do it again on Sunday. And sort of what that was like for you and what maybe feedback you've had since.
So I had a lot of feedback along the lines of what you were saying.
I bet you did.
I think something there resonated with people because when you're thinking about what matters most to you, we want to be lined up with the things that matter most.
Right.
I mean, that's a good life. It's a life of unity and integration, some people would say. So I as I'd mentioned in the message, I hadn't really planned on telling so many personal stories about myself. But as the message unfolded, as I was preparing it for the online service, something just shifted. And there was a line that came, actually the line that came to me, because I started thinking about these stories, was simply, I hadn't planned on telling you all of this today. So I thought, okay, you didn't plan on telling anybody these stories. So why are you telling the stories? And I felt like there had been a very deep calling in me to share this part of myself so that people would understand why I'm here.
Yeah.
And I've noticed for not a few years now, but for quite a number of years, that so many of my colleagues have walked away from the ministry.
Yeah.
And having said that, you can kind of begin to feel like, so, what is this all leading to? Because not only colleagues are walking away, but people really are leaving in droves.
Right.
So why are people staying? Because people are staying.
Right.
And I thought about our congregation. I thought about people who are feeling very excited about being here and looking forward to the future. And it just made me wonder about that. And the one takeaway is, my personal takeaway from all of this week is actually kind of simple, which is that in my life, the church has brought into my life so many experiences, so much of a connection with the transcendent, right? However we define that, with God and with Spirit, with Jesus. It's brought me into a community of people who've been so inspiring over the years. That's been the through thread of my life. And I can't even imagine what my life would have been like without that. And I've seen people make the most extraordinary sacrifices for one another, not just family to family, but people within congregations who've stepped up for one another in ways that might not happen in other settings. I'm not saying they wouldn't,
right,
but they are more, in my experience, they've been more likely to have happened within the church community. So I just saw that strong connection, and I don't want to lose it. And I would like to see others enjoy it. So I looked at our church school yesterday at the children who came forward for the children's message, and I thought, these wonderful opportunities await them, and we can make that possible for them, and they will be the better for it.
Yeah.
And we'll be the better for hearing their questions and their insights, right? Because it definitely goes both ways.
Absolutely.
And so all of those things rose to the surface and felt like they demanded to be said.
Yeah.
And so that's really some of the background.
It was fantastic. And I felt like there was something, I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but it felt like there was something so deeply authentic and fresh about what you were saying. It caught me. Out of my sort of reverie of thinking about what was happening next and him and blah, blah, blah. It's like something snapped it like snapped me to attention. So thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome.
And I think it was exciting, and it's exciting to look forward and look at this community that is so positive, and I think is so intentional about putting positive language out into the world, about being part of a community.
Agreed.
I have to admit, I can't imagine I'm alone in this. You think about people leaving the church, that's a common refrain we hear a lot. I don't know that I've ever thought about pastors leaving the church. I never thought about that. It makes perfect sense
Mm-hmm.
that to feel disillusioned and disenfranchised is not just air quote, congregation members, but
Mm-hmm.
clergy. It makes sense. I mean, there's, I'm sure there's less clergy coming through the pipeline. Like there's less organists coming through the pipeline for very similar reasons.
Yep.
I mean, the same thing is happening with organists. Although a lot of them end up becoming airline pilots, which always cracks me up. That seems to be like the next thing people do.
That's correct.
I think we just like lots of buttons.
I was going to say there must be something about.
Something about
Let's
just
see how this sounds.
all the gadgets. But I appreciate broadening that perspective too.
Our wonderful pastor for spiritual development, Shannon White, was sharing with me during the week, and I did mention this during the message, that she had come across an article, yet another article, by a pastor who left the church and explained why and so on. And I think that was a little bit of a prompt for me too. So okay, we're hearing that narrative a lot. Is there another narrative here?
Right.
And there is.
Yeah.
It is interesting. I would have said during the first 25 years or so of my ministry, maybe even longer than that, I really only encountered very rarely a colleague leaving ministry. In the last 15 years, many.
Really?
Many.
Yeah.
And their stories are often told on through magazines and periodicals like the Christian Century, sort of mainline publications, and that has become a dominant narrative. And I think, well, as you said, here's a congregation that wants to push out some really positive messages. What would be a counter to that? I do remember many years ago that an author by the name of Barbara Brown Taylor wrote a book called Leaving Church. And she had been regarded as one of America's most gifted preachers and a regular on any kind of major conference involving worship or preaching. And she wrote a book about leaving. Wow. And that was a major voice saying, I don't want to be part of this thing called church anymore. And so that was her story. I read that book. I could certainly understand some of what she was thinking and talking about, but so anyway, in the back of my mind, is there another book to be written called Why I'm Staying? So that's what I'm interested in exploring with our congregation and exploring with our listeners. And I'd love to find a way to start that conversation, because we're also noticing that people are actually coming to we're seeing new faces.
For sure.
So it's not as if it's all gone dry,
Yeah.
that people are still finding refreshment in the worship, in the hymns, in the prayers, in the preaching, all of it, that to me, that's a very hopeful sign.
Yeah. And that's exciting to think about, meeting new friends and sharing with them how special this community is, and also the online portion of our community, which is very much a valued part of our circle. I'm excited too, because as we're looking through this year, at the end of it, we're going to be drawing in all the thoughts and reflections that our community has and you've had. And we're actually speaking of book, we're going to make a book.
Yes. That's exciting.
Called What Matters Most. So stay tuned for that a year from now.
Mark it on your calendars now.
Mark it on your calendars. Available wherever you get your finest books. Yeah. So I'm excited. There's a lot of fun, creative things, blossoming, and we've got I'm really excited for the fall. I think there's going to be a lot of good stuff happening. So.
How can it not be creative with you here, Leslie?
And you. We can't help ourselves at this point.
I mean, come on.
Although I will say, I was in a meeting the other day and someone suggested I make another film. And I was like, thank you. I'm really honored and touched that you liked Ed's art film. I don't have another 100 hours to spend on a film right now. But I really appreciate the compliment.
You actually want to live your life?
I have a couple things I'd like to do. A few other tasks that need doing, like laundry. A little behind.
There you go.
But it was, we have, it's a
nice compliment.
It was
though.
a beautiful I'm very gratified, but that's also the fun thing about about this place. There's always some
Oh,
new creative thing to learn. I'm working with a team right now on a periodical situation,
yes, it's great.
which is so fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's so fun. It's great.
Yeah.
So much good stuff.
Experiments.
That's really what this place is about, I think. And
Yes.
so we are grateful for you joining us at this grand experiment.
Yes, indeed. We are very grateful.
And we are back weekly now.
Yes.
I think I can say that safely.
Yes.
And so we are so glad you have joined us. Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.